Before we get to Becky Edwards, we do want to turn a minute over to Erica Evans, a friend of MESA, who will share a commentary about some important issues that intersect with this meeting, which include, this is Women's History Month and the anniversary of the Relief Society. So Erica Evans currently lives in Idaho, as a former reporter for the Deseret News and Deseret Magazine, and currently a public affairs manager for an organization. So Erica, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone here. We did want to acknowledge these two important anniversaries that have passed recently. The first is International Women's Day, which was on March 8th. And this day is meant to commemorate the social, political, cultural, economic contributions of women all over the world. It dates back over 100 years, and I was looking into the history of a little bit. Dates back to the women's suffrage movement, but March 8th, the date wasn't kind of codified until 1917, and it started with a group of women in Russia who went on strike demanding peace and bread, and basically the end of World War I. And their strike turned into a mass strike, and days later it led to the abdication of the Tsar. And a provisional government stepped in and immediately gave women the right to vote. And I think what's interesting is the March 8th date is the day that the strike started. It's not the day that their goals were achieved necessarily. And so, especially when it comes to sustainability and climate change, you may feel like our goals, the goals we're trying to reach, are far off, but it doesn't mean that we can't stop and acknowledge and celebrate the achievements that we're making along the way and the seeds of action that we're planting. And the second is, it's the 180th anniversary of the Relief Society, which was March 17th. And Eliza Arsenault, when they were deciding what are they going to name the Relief Society, she was worried. She was worried that the Relief Society sounded as though they were responding to extraordinary occasions instead of meeting the common occurrences. This group got together because they wanted to make clothing for men that were working on building the temple. But Emma Smith replied to that concern, and she said, we are going to do something extraordinary. We expect extraordinary occasions and pressing calls. So I just really admire the vision of this small group, that they were going to accomplish something great. And as we know, the Relief Society is now the largest and one of the oldest women's organizations, and 7.5 million women call themselves members, and indeed has grown into something great. So in commemoration of this day, the Relief Society presidency has asked us to commit to acts of service. And I think that's a great way to commemorate it. There's been some great stories shared about relief societies all over the world, gathering supplies and taking action to support refugees in Eastern Europe right now. With this group, I think we'd all like to see more action service in favor of the earth, in addition to the other wonderful things. So I'm excited to hear from Becky Edwards today about some of her ideas, accomplishments, and her endeavors for service in the realm of sustainability.
Thank you so much, Erica. What a great way to start this meeting. Now let me introduce Becky Edwards, our speaker tonight. Becky is a lifelong Utahn and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She attended Brigham Young University, where she earned a Bachelor of Science and Master of Social Work and Master of Science degrees. She began her career as a social worker and counselor before winning a seat in the Utah House of Representatives in 2008 as a Republican, where she served for 10 years. During her time in office, Becky earned wide bipartisan respect in the legislature and gained a strong reputation for bringing people together. She worked cooperatively towards solutions on some of Utah's toughest issues, like education, affordable housing, healthcare, and climate change. Becky is married to John Edwards, and they have 4 children and 11 grandchildren. She and her husband recently served a church humanitarian mission for 2 years in American Samoa. She continues to be politically active and is currently a Republican candidate in Utah for the United States Senate. Welcome, Becky Edwards.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here with you this evening, and honestly, and having an opportunity to talk about something that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts. And this is our world, our earth, our home, basically. You know, we have a lot of songs in the LDS hymn book about homes, don't we? You know, this is something that we frequently think of our home as being a physical place where we live, you know, with 4 walls and a roof. And I think it's an interesting thing to contemplate what it means to have our home as the earth, in lieu of what we frequently think of. So if we think of, for instance, the words to Love at Home. This is from memory. So please help me in the comments if I miss some of these words. I'm humming it as I'm saying these words. There is beauty all around when there's love at home. Now I'm going to need some help. Who can help me with the words here? I'm going to actually try and just pull this up.
There is joy in every sound.
Thank you. Thank you. There is joy in every sound when there's love at home. Peace and plenty here abide, smiling sweet on every side, time to softly, sweetly glide when there's love at home. Then I want to go to the last verse. Kindly heaven smiles above when there's love at home. All the world is filled with love when there's love at home. Sweeter sings the brooklet by, brighter beams the azure sky. Oh, there's one who smiles on high when there's love at home. And I want us to think about that concept throughout my remarks, that the earth is our home, and that truly I believe there is one who smiles on high when there's love at home, our earthly home. And I'm going to share 2 stories with you, and then a few remarks that kind of tie these 2 stories together. The first is one that maybe some of you were even involved in. It has to do with the passage of a piece of legislation in 2018 when I was serving in the Utah House. The second story is an experience that I had when my husband and I were serving in American Samoa in the South Pacific on our mission. So I want to take you back to 2017. 2017, it's the end of the legislative session. For those of you not from Utah, our legislative session is 45 days. And we start basically like the middle of January, go till, first or middle of March. And if a bill is to be heard in a committee, it needs to be assigned to a committee from something called the Rules Committee. And they kind of are the power brokers there, and they decide this is a bill about education. It should go to the Education Committee, and this bill is about, law enforcement. It should go to that committee. And so there was a bill that sat in the Senate Rules Committee for a long time that year in 2017. And it was written and sponsored and brought to the state legislature primarily by a group of high school students out of Logan High School here in Utah. And it had to do with climate change. And that bill languished in the Rules Committee the entire session. And eventually, these students and the bill sponsor decided that what they would do is they would hold an unofficial public hearing for the bill, because these kids had put a lot of work into this, and they really wanted to have an opportunity to have their voices heard and share their viewpoints on this. So an email went out to all the legislators. Hey, this is an unofficial hearing on this, whatever the bill, it had a number at that point. And if you're interested, at the end of the day, just pop down to this committee room and listen. Well, I was really interested already in air quality and climate, because these had been big issues in my district here in Davis County, Utah, for a long time. At that time, all 5 of the oil refineries were in my district. We had a medical waste incinerator that was in my district. And so this issue mattered a lot to me. And I was also really curious, what did a bunch of high school students, what could they contribute to this conversation? And little plug for your Catherine Hayhoe event coming up. I'd heard her speak several times, once in person here in Utah, and she is awesome. So if you have a chance to actually participate in that event, I give that my highest recommendation. So anyway, I go to listen to the students, and they were, as predicted, amazing. They were on point. They knew their stuff. Their comments were so insightful and was really such a great experience. And my heart really went out to them. They didn't have anyone to really help them propel this bill forward. So I went up to them at the end of at that hearing, and I said, listen, I serve in the House. I'm a Republican. I would really love to work with you guys from now until the next session. So, those next 9 or 10 months, and let's see if we can prepare this bill so that next January we hit the ground running, we can get this across the finish line. And so would that be okay? And of course they were like, yeah, that'd be great. So we started as soon as that session ended at the end of 2017, and we started to work on the language that they already had. And we tried to anticipate what some of the concerns would be in a very conservative state that had just a few years before this actually passed a piece of legislation that said that climate change was actually not really happening and it was not a real thing. So we had our work cut out for us. Well, when we finally got to a place that I thought, I think this can pass, I told those students, you guys work on the folks up in Cache Valley, and I'm going to start with my colleagues here in the House. There's 75 people in the House, and I knew probably, a couple of handfuls would already be supportive of the bill, but I started right then meeting with people that I knew would hate the bill the most, quite honestly. The folks that I knew would be my hardest detractors the next January. And I'll never forget sitting down with my very first colleague, a rural Republican friend, and sitting down with him and saying, hey, I want to read this with you. I want to have your best eyes on this bill. I want to know where we went too far, what we left out, what we can do to make this better, because I want to do all of this work before the session begins. And it was probably 3 pages long. And we sat there, and like 30 seconds in, he just looked at me and said, well, Becky, I can't vote for this. I'm like, you haven't even read the whole thing. It gets better. Keep going, turn the page, keep reading. He's like, no, it's not that. Look in the title. I'm like, yeah. And he said, well, right there in the title, that's a problem. I'm like, what's the problem? And he said, well, see where it says climate change? I said, yeah. Well, that's a problem because that's not a real thing. And I said, well, it's actually, I don't know it's not a real thing. And I think I'm going to share some stuff about what's happening in your district and your county, and what about this and this thing. And I was sharing some real data from his part of the state. And he said, well, oh yeah, all that's real. Absolutely. But that's not climate change. That's just our climate is changing. And I said, aha, okay. I took my red pen, scratched out climate change in the title, and wrote changing climate. And he said, oh, well, yeah, you got my vote now. Everything else was great. Yeah, you've hit the mark. And so I did that over and over again with all of my colleagues to anticipate what the kind of comments, and there were people who had more things, and I used my red pen on more than one occasion to add things, take things out, to really address some of the real concerns. So then when January came, we passed this bill out of the House committee, then off the House floor, and then it goes to the Senate. The very same Senate committee that would not even hear the bill the previous year passes it out unanimously. That was a good day. And it goes on to pass out of the Senate, off the Senate floor. And the very next day, we start to get calls. CNN, New York Times, the other Republican states, the state of Texas, state of Alabama, and they're all saying basically the same thing. Did what we hear just really happen? Did Utah become the first red state in the nation to pass any piece of legislation acknowledging climate change? And I said, well, technically it was changing climate, but yeah, we did. And they all wanted to know, how did that happen? What did we do? What was our process that we went through? And I had an opportunity over and over again, first of all, to say, actually, let me connect you up with the students, because that was the amazing thing. And if you have a group of students who are willing to work with tenacity, with civility, with respect, and with unity to the ultimate cause, you're halfway to success right there. But it was a great opportunity to do what we call in Utah a lot, like the Utah way, right? Where you kind of find common ground and then you build on that. And I think the model that we were able to use there was successful in that we passed the bill, and it became something that has become the foundation for the work that the Kem C. Gardner Institute at the University of Utah is using on their framework, their roadmap, as they call it, for clean air and climate here in the state of Utah. And it's been a remarkable thing. And other states have actually used our language to try and move things forward in their state. So that's my first story. Second story. The end of my 10 years of serving in the Utah House, that time ended in December of 2018. So like 10 months after this climate resolution passed, my husband and I had put our papers in actually for a mission like in the fall of 2018, and got a call. And in May, we'd packed our bags and we were on our way to American Samoa. We were humanitarian missionaries. My husband was doing some medical work at a tropical medical center there in American Samoa. And I was the mental health advisor for the missionaries in the 8 missions there in the South Pacific, all the small island missions, and then taught at the community college. And one of the classes that I taught in the community college had a unit on climate change, which was awesome. And let me tell you about what that class meant. What that class meant is that this was not theoretical. This was not, in theory that, yeah, our climate is changing or any of this stuff. This meant in a very real way that they saw and witnessed every single year. These were, 18, 19-year-old kids. They knew that the coastline was receding. They knew that things were changing, that their relatives in some of these small other island countries, small countries in Micronesia and Tuvalu, that they had ancestral lands there, that they were changing and were really being impacted in a significant way. This was real. They knew the impact on their coral reef that surrounds that island and what that meant to the fish life and other things. And it was an amazing opportunity to share with them and have them share with me what our changing climate and climate change meant to them. Now, some of these students were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but not all. We had an opportunity to visit the National Oceanic Atmospheric, can't think of the last A, but the NOAA station that they have, one of the 4 NOAA stations around the world for air quality, is actually on the island of American Samoa. And we had a friend who was running that station there, and we got to go out and learn firsthand about some of the ways they capture air and the balloons they send up, and it was really interesting. But here's what I learned from the members of the church there on this island who I taught and also were in our Relief Society. This matters to them in a personal way, and there's probably no issue that unifies them with the rest of the world than the impact that they feel when they hear people in the West talk about and do things about this issue. I'm going to pause that story for 1 second and say, when we first moved there, it was an amazing experience to drive around the island and just, as you can imagine, and many of you maybe some of you have been to Samoa or some of these Pacific islands, and probably, maybe many to Hawaii. But the beauty of the plant life and just the abundance of growth is amazing. And we were in a small little cinder block house owned by the hospital, but with a fair amount of land around it. And one of the first things that I did was I kept asking people, hey, how do we grow these plants? And where's the closest plant store on the island? Now, this is a mountainous island that is actually in the movie Moana, where the princess that eventually is all fiery, and then she turns into the green island, and she lays down, and that becomes the island. That's kind of what American Samoa looks like. Very mountainous with a coral reef around it, and then one road sort of skirts around all of the perimeter of about half of the perimeter of the island, like those 30 miles or something. And it's basically right on the coast. And I thought there's got to be some plant stores somewhere where we can buy this stuff. And we kept looking around. And as it turns out, finally someone said to me, there are no plant stores. I'm like, well, how are people growing this stuff? And they said, you just ask somebody, go up to somebody and say, hey, can I cut off a piece of that flowering bush? Can I cut off a piece of your tree? Can I cut off a piece of that? And then you go home and you stick it in the ground. I'm like, and then what happens? And they said, and it grows. I'm like, there's no way. I thought, honestly, for the first 2 months, people were just teasing me. And I thought, how mean to be teasing a senior sister missionary. That doesn't seem very Samoan. And then finally someone convinced me, no, this is really how it works. And my husband and I got to work on our garden. And we did that very thing. We went around to people's houses and said, hey, we really love that flowering bush. Can we have a piece of it? And we were thinking, maybe we'd get like 18-inch type start, and people would give us stuff you cannot even believe. And we grew an amazing garden. It was actually a real source of solace for us in the middle of COVID. They closed down the hospital for a while. A lot of the missionaries went home. So my work really slowed down, and we spent a lot of time in that garden growing things and really feeling the plentiful nature of God's love on those islands. But back to climate and what that meant for that community there on that island and all the other South Pacific islands. It was a challenge that they felt in a really personal way, and the respect and reverence that they felt for God's land, their home, they felt that love in a very real way. It was a great lesson. It was a great opportunity for me to talk about the unity that is around this issue worldwide, and to the different extents of people understanding this, et cetera, and the work, but that the work is going forward, and especially from a global standpoint. One thing I had a really interesting opportunity to do I extended out this climate change unit to, I think, an additional week, because I really wanted everyone in the class to understand what the different faiths that were really prevalent on the island, what their beliefs were around climate, and that this was something that mattered, not just economically, not just because their village was going to be changed and people's homes were going to have to move and all of that, but that to the Catholics on the island, that the Pope had said things about this, that it mattered tremendously to that faith, that the London Missionary Society and the Methodists and the evangelical churches and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints all had a reverence and a belief in environmental stewardship. And the words were different, but the principles were the same. And it was a beautiful opportunity to reinforce what they already felt in their hearts, and that unity around religion and their lived experience, and the sense that, big Western countries cared about them and that we were coming together. in a humanitarian way and in a global citizen way, I think made a really, really big impact on their sense of self and their sense of relevance on such a big issue. I want to go back to the story about the climate change resolution, HCR 007. We love to call it 007 because it made it sound so cool, and it was pretty remarkable. But here's what I love to tell people. And as was said, I'm running for the US Senate right now. And one of the opportunities that you have when you run for a seat like this is you spend a lot of time going around the state, talking about issues and doing a lot of listening and a lot of learning. And it's a great privilege. Yesterday, I was in Vernal and spent some time in the Uinta Basin. And I've been out there a couple of times just since I've been on the campaign trail. Had an opportunity to tramp around in a pair of dusty boots in natural gas and oil country. I had not had that opportunity before to see, actually up close in person, what an oil rig really looks like, and have someone who's been in the oil fields their entire life talk to me about the innovations and the creative ways they're using technology to make less of an impact and more clean and environmentally safe and responsible way, how they're bringing that product out of the ground. And yesterday evening, had an opportunity to speak to a bunch of primarily Republican delegates in that community, who one would think may not have had a strong allyship around climate change, around environmental stewardship, around these things, because their livelihood in that Uinta Basin is really based on a product that often gets vilified. In Roosevelt, Utah, yesterday, I had a chance to meet with a group of about 15 people before we went to this large event at night. And we sat down with people who were deeply engaged in the oil and natural gas industry, people who were involved in environmental issues, and were also some people who were in economic development for the basin. And I was so encouraged at the tone, the respect, and the way that people came together, not on the exact words, not on the exact, I think they would have been people that were like, put down their paper. No, we don't call it climate change. And it mattered to me a whole lot less in 2018 and today, what we call this. Although in a perfect world, I think we all have, what our ideal is, but in a realistic world and in a where are we today and how can we bring people together? It matters to have respect, find common ground, all the things that helped us pass that piece of legislation in 2018, and show kindness and understanding. I think it matters tremendously. And the shared words around religion. And again, this is not solely the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but it is around faith traditions in general, have really become embedded in my discussions as I talk about this with people. And it is not a mix, as some people have a concern. Are you mixing church and state? That's what this is. It's not about that. It's about coming to where people are and understanding it. So it's about talking to the people in the Uinta Basin about what this means in their community, what that bill in 2018 meant, as we talked about the important ways that the state of Utah could respect and work for a diversified energy portfolio, how we could help support a growing economic diversity in some of our parts of our state that are in different sectors around energy. The point is, whether you're talking in the Uinta Basin, whether you're talking to Republican colleagues or to people in a South Pacific island, the words and the respect and this deep reverence for the earth and our planet, I think is a model that can be taken to different places and different settings and can really help us move the needle forward. I learned a lot from those high school students, and they had been well taught by a retired teacher, Jack Green, up there in Logan, and by several members of Citizens Climate Lobby. And I know that that model is something that all of you are already engaged in. So this is a tiny bit of preaching to the choir who are singing and working on Love at Home, is keep up that good work. This is the model that I found to be effective. And I have a deep and abiding love for this work. I know that there is a lot of opportunity to work and lead on this issue in the US Senate. This is one of the reasons why I'm in this race, is because I think for far too long this has been a divisive issue, and we can do so much better. We have an opportunity right now to share language, share goals, and work on this in a really productive and inclusive way. And I look forward to doing that. So let's see. I think we're going to have some questions, and
thank you so much, Becky. That was
yeah,
really informative and personal and inspiring. We appreciate your service working with young people to promote better understanding and solutions to the climate crisis that we're in. And your personal experience in American Samoa was fascinating. Obviously, they really experienced the impacts of a changing climate right there at sea level and in the South Pacific. Feel free to post questions, members of the audience, in the chat. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Please be respectful as you do that. And I'll start with some questions of my own before we get to some questions of others. So my first thought is thinking about Jesus and Moses and Joseph Smith, who went to natural places to commune with God and for spiritual connection. I wonder if you could talk at all about that, what you see in those examples of, Jesus going out into the wilderness and Moses going up into the mountain and Joseph Smith going into the woods and other people going into nature. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think we see that repeatedly, and in our world, we often think of those places of beauty as things that are, I don't know, far away, right? It's like, oh, the beauty of the Puget Sound in the state of Washington, or the beauty of Hawaii, or the beauty of snow-capped mountains, or whatever. I think it's less for me about the exact location, and if it is even thought to be uniformly beautiful, but it's something about being outside, being in nature, being there long enough to sort of get rid of a lot of the outside things, the everyday things that really weigh you down. And I think it creates a communal experience for people and the divine. We see that whether, in the examples that you've just shared, that was something that was, I think of all the things that Joseph Smith had on his mind at the time when the church was this fledgling entity, and all of the things that were going on. It's pretty remarkable that this was top of mind for him, this sense of place, this sense of connection with the earth, with us, and the thread of the divine that went into the creation of the earth, our existence. And when we leave, what the earth will, receive its paradisical glory. I mean, what does that I think we all wonder what that will be, because there's some pretty remarkable places already, and what will that be? But I think to be part of that thread as a dot on that line, I think brings us to a communal experience with our Heavenly Father, and that's something that I think we all really yearn for.
Well said. There's a beautiful book that talks about the benefits that we experience when we're in nature. It's called The Nature Fix, and when it talks about when you go in nature, your heart and your mind and your body just calm down, and you can think more clearly. It's a powerful thing that we all need, and that can help us to find a spiritual connection when we're out in nature. If
I can just respond, Anne had a question here, which is really beautiful. She was from Roosevelt, so the High Country Pizza place. That's where we were. It was amazing, by the way. And she wants to know if any members of the Ute tribe were involved in our recent trip, and they were. And I'll tell you, the people from the Ute tribe, Navajo tribe, who I've spoken with about this issue specifically, have a very, very real connection. This is embedded in their stories, in their very humanity is embedded in the land, the respect. And I think this goes to some of the reasons why they're deeply engaged in conversations around public lands and use. So yeah, they were. Thanks for bringing that up. Their experience, especially out in the basin, is really a unique one, and the way the lands are sort of piecemealed out there makes it really imperative that respectful conversations include all the voices, because there is no one section here and another section here for federal lands and BLM and state and whatever. It is a very tiny patchwork of, if it were a quilt, it would be like 2-inch squares. It is a patchwork of ownership, and I think we see opportunities to have those conversations better as well.
We appreciate that. MESA has a similar desire to work with and engage with different communities that connect to the land. Thanks, Anne, for your question. Another question from Ben says, do you have any advice about how to usefully engage about environmental issues when there is fundamental disagreement about scientific facts? For me, it is much easier when there are disagreements of opinion and values, but when there isn't a shared set of facts, it can be really disorienting. There also seem to be direct gospel implications of this departure from truth.
Yeah, I think that's a super hard thing. And you sort of have to be willing to set, as we do sometimes with people who have disagreements. And this is not even just disagreements like what this question is about with Ben. It's not just disagreements about I don't know, what should we do about it, but is it even happening? And that's really, really hard. But to put that piece of it aside and to say, like, for instance, this is one of the real benefits, I would say, silver lining to this severe drought we're having right now in Utah, that it has been extreme enough that a lot of attention has gone into the Great Salt Lake conversations and what's happening there. And it's pretty hard to deny, the footage from the air that shows the receding shoreline of the Great Salt Lake that is almost unrecognizable in a lot of ways, and the implications for that. So what I've always found to be really useful is to just start with something that is undeniable. So and sometimes these are disasters that you're kind of pointing out and saying, hey, this is something that has happened, and this has a connection with our weather patterns, our changing climate, whatever kind of entry words you can use to kind of start a conversation. But wildfires here, at least in the West. So in Utah, couple of those things have been conversations about extreme wildfires. And, this is not just in Utah, but the impact on us of California, and even the fires in Oregon last year, the water shortage, most extreme in like a century that we're facing right now. Those are other things. You can get bogged down in details about what the science is around that and what's causing it. But I think to focus on this and this is happening, like I did with my colleague from the rural part of the state, and say this and this is happening. What can we do about that? And try and be really proactive in solutions-based discussions. Sometimes can move us past some of the sticky places that we get into. And that's a suggestion I found to be really helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think an example of that is with the Great Salt Lake, where we're realizing that if the lake dries up and the sediment becomes exposed and the wind blows those sediments around, we'll be suffering a lot of air pollution because of the metals and the other things that are on those sediments. And it doesn't really matter what caused it. We just need to find a solution. Well, it does matter what caused it, because that can help us figure out the solution. But
I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, it does matter, because then we can learn and we can do better in the future. But for the immediate discussions and for the immediate kind of, hey, will you sit at the table with me and have a discussion? Will you sit here with me? And can I understand? Can I listen to you? And can we learn from each other? I think even to get someone to sit with you for a minute, whatever that takes, that's worth it. And the other, I'm convinced that it's a little bit like when our kids were learning to ski, and they were at Brighton Ski School here, and I remember one of our daughters was at Brighton Ski School. She went through like lessons or level 1 through 5 in 1 year. I'm like, oh wow, she's going to be done with ski lessons pretty soon. Then what? And her teacher said, well, then it's just mileage. It's just miles on the hill. You just have to keep going, and then she's going to get it. And of course she did. But that's a little bit like these conversations. You just have to sit with somebody long enough that they feel trust with you, that you're not trying to convince them they're wrong. You're not trying to blame them or shame them because they don't believe the same thing. And also give people enough space around themselves to shift a viewpoint, to shift an opinion, because a lot of times our conversations are so tight around, like they're here and we're at them so tightly that there is no wiggle room for people to have an exit strategy out of what they believed at the beginning and their new awareness and how that can shift. And now they want to see it this way. So to provide people space to move and shift and change, I think is an incredibly generous thing we can provide for each other in all settings, but especially something like this, because it's a new way of looking at things. And so that's just another thing that I think is useful.
Great. There was a question, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Is there a historical or modern figure in Samoa who the people hold in respect regarding the environment or climate protection?
For climate protection, I'm not sure about that. They have in American Samoa, because they're a territory, they have a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, a non-voting member actually, and it's Amada Radawagan. She sits on, I believe that she sits on committees and she can vote in committee, but she just can't vote on the floor. And she's testified a lot before Natural Resources and has been a really strong advocate. Her father was one of the members of the U.S. House before her. This was going back a few years, but she's been a really strong advocate for that territory, and is a really good person at building bridges, building relationships, and genuinely kind of playing the long game. And I think she's probably someone who has made a really big impact. The traditional belief is that all of Polynesia was born out of one of the islands. American Samoa is one big island, big meaning 25 miles long, 4 miles wide, and then some small, 2 or 3 small little islands. But one of those small islands, Manua, was actually the birthplace of all of Polynesia. And one of those sort of tales of origin stories in that culture does involve someone who created it's a creation story, an origin story, and it does have a lot of beautiful tone and impact on the beauty of the land in all the little islands around, small island states and nations.
Thank you. I love your examples of reaching out and talking and listening and hearing people and meeting them where they are. Do you have any other advice for finding common ground with folks that have different opinions or different views on the environment, and how can our shared faith help us find common ground on environmental stewardship?
I think shared faith can actually help provide words that have meaning across politics. So when I mentioned that in this class I was teaching, that I read words from the Pope, and I was actually surprised how many churches have lengthy opinions about the earth and stewardship, and even like some step into kind of more policy things about climate change and things that their belief systems inform them around specific policies. But as you read those, I think maybe I could send some of these references to you, and you could share them with the members. But it's really helpful to read through those words and feel, you get definitely a feel of okay, what is the approach, the feel to talking about the world, the earth, our environment. So you kind of start with world, earth, environment. How do we take care of it? This is sort of stewardship, general high level things, and then some specifics. And it's kind of any place along that path that someone can jump in. It's like this hopscotch where 2 people are at the end and they're flipping the jump rope, and you're waiting for it to come along, and you sort of jump in, and then you're jumping rope, and you want to create spaces to find some place that they can hop into the conversation, they can contribute. And part of that, actually, if you really want to do it right, is doing your homework and reading up on the Jewish faith. What does this mean? What is the earth? What is their belief around the creation? And in a tribal community, indigenous peoples around the world, what is their belief system? And tying kind of threading things together and weaving an understanding. But it starts with using words that show respect and an understanding of where they may be beginning to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. You referred to Catherine Hayhoe as an exemplary person of faith who speaks about the environment. I think we can learn from her book, Saving Us. It's powerful. It's full of powerful examples about how she connects with people of faith about environmental protection.
One thing that she talks a lot about, and of course she'll tell you this herself, but she talks about respect. And it's in a time when we live in such a divisive political community right now. It's one of the most disappointing things. And I think we have, especially around climate, this is something that people point to, and I think it's true as being one of the most important issues to the younger voters, younger people in the US and across the world. Certainly this is folks under 35 or 40, certainly under 30s. This is a top issue, but it's a very hard issue for I'm going to say like a 70-year-old to think, why is their 25-year-old grandson thinking that this is so important when there's so many other issues that are even more important? But the bridge between those really can be made if on both sides there is that understanding of why their beliefs are where they are. It genuinely, I mean, some of these things sound so easy and so basic, but they're really, really hard to do when they're such a divisive issue and there is no solid place where truth can be found. So you have to genuinely start where the other person is, and start with this idea of that you're there really to learn from them. And that, I think, not shaming, not correcting, not educating, but mostly spending a lot of time listening, and that this is the long game. I mean, this is, at the same time that this is urgent and we know we're up against it here as a community, as a earth, we really do have to play the genuine long game with building a community of people who are at least believers in moving forward.
I agree. Final question, and thank you so much, Becky Edwards, for speaking to us tonight about the intersection of your faith and your concern about the earth and how it's important to all of us, and across different faiths. It's a beautiful message. My final question is, what inspires you, or what gives you hope for the future in relation to our faith and the environmental stewardship that we have? What inspires you and excites you?
Quite honestly, I'm inspired when I see people from such different backgrounds coming together on an issue of respecting our land, respecting our earth. And this is, people in different parts of the state, people who are what you'd say, yeah, I can see that. They kind of are an environmentalist. They care about this, or they're a climate change person. Yeah, I can see this. They're into outdoor activities or whatever your assumption is about someone. But it's really fun to see the partnerships that are growing around taking care of our planet. And this is, people in sportsman industry. This is people who are into outdoor recreation. These are scientists who care deeply about getting into the weeds of all of air quality and PM 2.5 and what all of the different particulates mean and all of that. It's moms, it's young moms. This is a group that I'm seeing align tremendously with this work in general around environmental stewardship, because it means something to them to have their kids be able to go outside and play in recess the entire month of January here in Utah, and not just miss 2/3 of those days because they're bad air days and you're not allowed to go outside for recess those days. That issue now means something to those moms. It means something to people who want to recreate and be outside and feel that connection when we're talking about public lands in certain ways, or when we're talking about access. And I think to make things be personal and to have people sort of be generous with the gift of sharing their stories. And what I see over and over, and this is to your question, what encourages me is the generosity of people who are in this space, who share their stories, their personal and their intimate reasons why this matters to them, whether it's an experience they had where they felt divinity in nature, and it was a life-changing experience, and this is where they feel the closest to God, where they feel inspired, where they feel connected, or it's someone who had familial experiences or whatever it is. When people are sharing those stories with you and with others, it is a gift that then opens up people's hearts, and they're willing to share that too. And when those experiences happen, I think it creates a pathway forward for solving problems and kind of working together. I think at the end of the day, that's what inspires me. That's what I think I've had such a great privilege of mine, great privilege when I served in the Utah House to work on these issues. And I feel oddly encouraged, if that's possible, cautiously encouraged maybe, about the work that I think is possible on the federal level too. I think we're primed to lead out as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with the perspective that we have and the deep commitment to working with civility. I look at the groups that I know are here on this call. I recognize so many names, and feel like I want to give shout outs to so many of you who I know have been in this space for a really long time, and longer than I have, from like a policy standpoint or action standpoint, and how I want to give respect and gratitude for the work that has gone on beforehand when things have been really a deep slog, and they continue to be in many ways. But I feel encouraged and deeply committed to be part of this work going forward on a national level, and look forward to having an opportunity to continue to work together to make things better and make an impact that will help us globally as citizens of this world, and also as brothers and sisters across the planet. I really appreciate and have a deep respect for you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Becky Edwards, for speaking and for your passion and your wonderful optimism about the future. I too am optimistic. You mentioned the students from Logan and their efforts, and the young people today are really impressive. They understand the issues, they care deeply, they want their future Earth to be a place of beauty and health and opportunity. And I'm excited about the future. We have big challenges right now, but we have a lot of people working together to solve problems, and there's technology, and there's a lot of desire and efforts to make things better. And so I'm excited too. And that's why we at the Mormon Environmental Stewardship Alliance are doing the work we're doing, and we're trying to encourage others to get engaged, and we're trying to build on the good work that other people are doing, like you and others. So thank you again, Becky, for speaking with us tonight. We encourage you to go to our website, mesastewardship.org, if you want more information about the work that we do. If you want to get involved, you can contact us.